Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Kaylin. I am a second-year PhD student in History and African American Studies at Yale. And in addition to that, I run 3 businesses. I have a consulting firm known as Accepted Consulting, which focuses on access to higher education for students wanting to go from community college all the way through graduate school programs such as masters and PhDs in the US, UK, Canada, and EU. The second is a startup, which is a social network for academic-minded people inside and outside of the academy, which I co-founded with my best friend Danielle. And then my third business is what you're watching right now, which is my YouTube channel. And the question I get asked the most is, how do you manage it all? How do you manage your time when you're doing a PhD that is highly demanding and also running businesses and still maintaining a personal life and trying to maintain a healthy lifestyle? In today's video, I'm going to be walking you through my top 10 tips for time management as someone that has a busy lifestyle. This can apply to basically anyone, whether you are a working professional or you are a student. Any of these tips will be useful to you, and you can take and choose what it is that works with your schedule. My tips are designed to help you figure out what works for you, what routines are going to work within your own schedule, and how it is that you can utilize your time best. The top 3 things that we're going to discuss in this video is how much time I spend on any given task, how it is that I make time for rest and wellness, as well as my general mindset within my schedule and how it is that I maintain my day-to-day life. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. And now for a quick message about the sponsor of today's video, Babbel. Babbel is a new language learning application which is all about retention and recognition, as well as being able to actually speak the words and learn pronunciation. As a PhD student in history, I have language requirements for my degree. And when I looked at the classes that were offered at Yale, I either felt that they were moving too fast in pace or they just weren't offered at all. And when I looked around for different tutors, I found that they were often expensive and difficult to get a hold of with my busy schedule. But what's really nice about Babbel and this application that allows you to also learn pronunciation is that you can work on the go. You can set different goals and make your way through the courses at your own pace. And the other thing that is super useful about Babbel in particular is that you can actually join live classes with no more than 6 students and an instructor. This is the Babbel Live feature, which is excellent because you can also filter the classes by which level you're at and what time of day or what time of the week you're available. Again, this is unlike other courses because it doesn't have as strict a schedule, and you can also figure out which instructor is the best fit for you. They have so many different well-trained instructors to teach you. They also have different videos and courses that you can tap into at any time in order to focus on your language learning. Additionally, as I said before, classes at your university or with a private tutor are expensive. And the thing I really like about Babbel is that it's much more affordable and it also works in with my busy schedule. So, for example, in today's video, we're talking about time management. I can throw in a 20-minute block between tasks in order to work on my language learning with the Babbel application. The courses are quick and simple, and I can focus on getting ahead some days and then can come back to it when it works with my schedule. I personally really love the Babbel Live feature, however, because not only is it offered in various time zones, but it also allows you to interact and actually learn language by speaking to another person in that language. Everybody says it, immersion and practice makes perfect when it comes to languages, and this allows you to go above and beyond what other applications often offer in order for you to actually focus on retention. Babbel is offering you 40% off of their application, as well as the new Babbel Live feature, which you can check out in the description down below. Thanks to Babbel, you can jumpstart your language learning on the go. Let's go ahead and get into today's video. First off, we have planning your perfect week. Within this, I use my Notion template in order to establish my perfect schedule. When you're running businesses and you're doing a PhD, your schedule is often constantly in flux. Unlike back when I used to have a 9-to-5 job in medtech back in the Silicon Valley, where I had very set hours and the tasks were established within that job, my schedule now is a lot more fluid. And that means that I have to account for different meetings that may come up or different events that I've signed up for. But what I try to do is essentially block time in my schedule where I say that I'm going to be working on a particular task. Within this, I also have particular days that are focused on a specific task. For example, on Mondays, I have my meeting with one of my comprehensive exam committee members, which means that Mondays, the only thing that I want to be focusing on is reading for comprehensive exams and preparing for my meeting. So Mondays are specifically focused on my PhD. However, Tuesdays, I focus on my businesses. While I spend the second half of the day working on my readings for school, the first half of the day is dedicated to admin, meeting up with clients, as well as preparing any meeting slides that I have for the all hands meeting for Accepted Society in the afternoon. Tuesdays are a bit of a mix, but then on Wednesdays, I have a meeting every other week with my second committee member, which means that I want to dedicate that full day every week just to my studies. This is important, and I'll talk about this even more in the video, but it also helps establish boundaries, not only for me mentally within my routine, but also for my team, my friends, as well as when I end up setting meetings. Because within this, I can essentially say to anyone that these are the days that I work on school and I am unavailable. These are the days that I have flexibility. So having different days for set tasks helps you compartmentalize what you need to get done any given day, and also allows you to think ahead even if you're trying to plan months in advance. My second tip is keeping a calendar rather than a to-do list. As someone who uses a physical planner, who uses Notion as well as Google Calendar, I wanted to preface this particular one by saying that while having to-do lists is important, we can often create the list and become incredibly overwhelmed by how much is on that list. So my recommendation is actually to put those tasks into your calendar when you want to actually get them done. This allows you to be realistic about what it is that you can actually get done within a particular period of time. So within that perfect week time block, I will say that I have particular points in time when I can run errands, or that I can be reviewing the budget for the businesses. So when putting your to-do list into the calendar, you can actually make time to get them done, as well as to feasibly see what it is you're capable of completing. This is something I learned while reading Grace Beverly's book and watching other creators such as Ali Abdaal or PhD in Productivity. I've watched a lot of YouTubers who talk about time management and how it is that they manage their teams especially, and this is something that has been incredibly important for me because when I have a to-do list, I also need to be able to share that with my assistant. I need my team to be aware of what it is that I'm working on, and so I have shared calendars that also have things that I'm working on for the businesses, so that way people know when to expect certain things from me. This is really important when it comes to client documents and other things that I need to get done for my team, but it's also really important when it comes to work for my PhD. Because in addition to coursework and other expectations that are the bigger hoops in the program, there's also tangential projects that you need to be working on at all times. This includes publishing or working on applying for grants. And so being able to make sure that I am embedding my to-do list into my calendar and making the time to get those things done is incredibly important, especially when it is that I'm time blocking any individual day. One quick disclaimer is that I still use a physical planner. I still use it to write out my day-to-day time blocks and my to-do list, but I also think it's important to use your calendar, especially if you're somebody that has a busy schedule and is juggling multiple projects at once. Number 3 is develop a routine based on your body clock. So everybody's circadian rhythms and ways of learning are going to be different. One thing that I've learned, especially over the last few years, is that my patterns of needing to rest and when I am the most productive are different than my peers. This is gonna be something that you're gonna need to experiment with, and I've experimented with it over the last couple of years, but I've learned that essentially you need to figure out how much sleep you need in order to be productive. Do you need to nap? Do you need to work straight through? What times of day do you tend to be the most focused? When do you tend to disassociate a little bit? For me, for example, I'm really productive in the mornings, but around 1 to 3 p.m., that's when I am the least productive. That is when my brain starts to check out. I'm not making connections. It is the worst time in the day for me to be writing. And so with that, I usually use that time to take a break. Usually that includes a nap. I am somebody that likes to power nap. It's what works for my body. I figured out over time that I am somebody that doesn't sleep for long periods of time. I'm more of a napper. And so it's better for me to take intervals of sleep in the middle of the day and in the evening rather than just sleeping, for example, a solid 8 hours in the evening, because unlike some people, I can't sleep all the way through the night. And so that's just what works for me and my body. Another thing to consider is not just sleep and productivity or focus, but also thinking about your nutrition and caffeine intake. So for example, when you drink a cup of coffee in the morning, what is typically the result? Do you tend to be more focused? Is that the time of day that works best for you? Does having a cup of coffee in the afternoon actually help you focus? Or are you just using it to hold off sleep? For me, for example, if I have a cup of coffee between 1 and 3 p.m., it's still not going to help me be focused. It's just going to increase my heart rate. Ultimately, I just don't find that I get the result out of having caffeine in the afternoon as much as I would if I took it in the morning and maybe had a cup of tea or a cup of coffee in the evening if I'm going to be staying up late. So this ultimately comes down to experimentation. You want to figure out what it is that your body needs in terms of nutrition, in terms of sleep, in terms of movement, in order to be focused at particular times. I was once a professional athlete, and within that, one thing that you learn is how to keep your body moving at a particular percentage. So most of the time you are not going to be going at 100 or even 90% unless you are competing. This also applies to your brain and the way that your body functions in the day-to-day. For example, you do not want to be pushing yourself at 100% all of the time. That's when you end up burning out. See where it is that you can get some rest within your schedule, that you can bring it down to 20 or 30% where you can kind of coast. This includes answering emails or doing admin or, for example, doing data entry, things that are essentially mindless or that don't require as much energy. One question I get a lot is how it is that you can maintain your reading without getting sleepy. This ultimately comes down to your ability to focus and keep your energy up while doing that task. If you were raised to read before bed, you have trained your brain to think that reading equates to falling asleep. And you essentially have to break that pattern when you're in school. So for example, for me, I will not read in bed if it's for school. I will typically try to read at my desk or in my reading chair and set up a scenario where I am not likely to fall asleep. For me, I also find it easier to read on my iPad or on my computer, strangely enough, when I am feeling sleepy because the light keeps me awake. So the major takeaway from this section of the video is figuring out what routine works for your body and ultimately being able to exert your energy when and where it is that it's necessary. So think about when it is that you need to exert to 70% and where it is that you can preserve within your schedule, essentially training your brain in the same way that athletes train their bodies. All right, number 4 is all about environment. So one thing we've learned, especially in the last 2 years with COVID restrictions and needing to stay inside and many of us going to remote working from home models, is that when you are in isolation, it is harder to get work done. It has been proven time and time again, and ultimately people have sought to find community and ways to get their work done that allows them to maintain that social element of their lives, but also get their work done. And this is what brings me to the concept of body doubling. So this is something that's been studied by psychologists for quite some time, that when someone else is in the room working with you, you are more likely to focus on your own work. And we've essentially applied this method to the accountability workshops at Accepted Society. Within these workshops, our members join and we work on a Pomodoro method. The Pomodoro method, it basically uses a timer of intervals of either 25 or 50 minutes with breaks in between. And this allows us to work all together as a community, but also to have those breaks and that reprieve. Another thing to keep in mind is just general environment. Are you putting yourself in a situation where you have a clean workspace where you feel like you can focus on your work and actually get it done? One thing I've found over the pandemic, for example, is that if I stay working it from home all of the time in front of my big screens, I tend to just kind of meander around the internet and I start to kind of fiddle around with my email or fiddling around with my computer. But if, for example, I move to the library or I go to a local coffee shop, I am far more likely to get my work done. It's partially a bit about comfortability, but also when I leave the apartment, I'm very intentional about only bringing the things that I need. Whereas when you're at home, sometimes it's very easy to get distracted, especially if you live with others that may be trying to get your attention. So finding ways to not only switch up your environment to see what is the most useful and conducive space for you to get your work done, but also try to establish study groups and other types of formats of studying that allows you to body double. This concept has also become really popular with YouTube live study with me's. I do these quite often, as do many of my friends, for example, Holly Jane or Danielle. I'll have their videos linked down below if you are looking for someone to study with. Also check out my Study With Me playlists because there are many recordings, many lives where they go for multiple hours. And so if you are needing that support, if you are needing that environment in order to simulate the space where you are the most productive, then definitely look up the live study with me's, check out accepted societies, accountability workshops, and reach out to a friend, see if they're wanting to go to the library and work together, because ultimately your environment does affect your ability to focus, it does affect your ability to get your work done, and you need to figure out what essentially works for you. One last thing to mention in this section is that you also want to think of your environment in terms of your senses. So for example, smell, sound, touch, all of those things also contribute to your experience and your brain's memory of when it is that you are best focused. So for example, people will watch those ambiance YouTube videos in order to study, which has lo-fi music, so something quiet but slightly upbeat, that also has the crackling of a fireplace or that has the sound of rain. Figure out what sensory factors contribute to your focus and think about what types of effects those particular things have on your workflow. For example, if I'm reading and I'm listening to really quiet classical music, I will get really sleepy. But I listen to quiet music while I'm writing because it allows me to stay calm and centered. So also think about what types of environment works depending on the task that you're taking on. Number 5 may seem rather simple, but turn off notifications. It has been said many a time, but ultimately the distractions of having multiple notifications going off all of the time really changes your ability to maintain focus. I have seen study tubers all the time talk about trying to remove your phone from the room where you are working, and I absolutely agree with this. However, if you are someone who is using computers, especially if you're using the Apple ecosystem, most of those notifications, even if you've put your phone away, are still available on your computer. So I use software that actually blocks the websites from me being able to view them while I'm in focus mode, and I also turned off notifications for particular applications, and I quit them when I'm getting my work done. One of the most distracting things to me when I'm working is text messages and email notifications. I will check my email 1,000 times a day if you let me. And one thing that I have done in order to limit that as a distraction is removing those notifications both from my phone as well as from my computer. So I have to physically open up the application in order to get to it. However, if you are somebody that still doesn't help and you are still going and checking your notifications, then I also recommend actually logging out of your accounts when you are studying. This may seem like an extreme measure, but if you are somebody that is easily distractible or a little impulsive, then this is something that will really help you limit distractions and allow you to focus. Also, many times people ask about procrastination and when they're checking notifications all of the time. This is a trap that I fall into as well. I am also fallible. I make these mistakes. I scroll on TikTok for hours on end, but ultimately we have to get our work done. And so you want to use the other tips from this video. For example, setting up an environment that is not only conducive to your focus, but that you actually enjoy. That will help you establish a routine around focusing on your work. Limiting notifications, establishing the environment, all of those things will help contribute to your ability to set up a conducive study environment or working environment in order to get your tasks done effectively. One of the most important aspects of time management is being able to move from task to task seamlessly and to limiting distractions, because at the end of the day, time management is all about efficiency. So limit distractions, turn off those notifications, And let's move on to the next one. Number 6 is project manage your life. As a business owner, something that we talk a lot about is project management. Who is on a particular task? How can we delegate? And how is it that we're building teams that are working together to get certain things done? If you are someone who is working a 9-to-5 job or you have other side hustles, think about how it is that you can regulate and delegate. Ultimately, this is the one thing that has really changed my workflow this past year. I now have a team of 7 that work for us at Accepted Consulting and a team of 4 at Accepted Society. Ultimately, I have a team that I can lean on for things that relate to my business, so that way I can focus on my PhD and I can also focus on the big tasks at hand for the businesses rather than on the administrative and menial tasks. But what does this mean if you're on your own? Ultimately, you need to delegate tasks based on time and figure out when it is that you need to exert certain energy in order to get the tasks done. So for example, rather than responding to emails every single day, what I personally would recommend is you give yourself 30 minutes at the beginning of the day and 30 minutes at the end of the day where you respond to emails. This will allow you to stay out of your inbox for the majority of the day. This may be more challenging if you have certain types of demands within your job, but this is something that I have implemented within my own schedule, that I do not check my email in the middle of the day in order to maintain focus. Again, it's all about efficiency, and ultimately you need to manage your tasks in the way that you would a major project. So for example, when I'm giving an employee a particular task, I have a deadline, I have my expectations about when I want it done and how I want it done, and ultimately they are the ones that have to regulate their time and manage those tasks effectively. When it comes to my PhD, I have multiple projects on at once, so I have to compartmentalize my dissertation away from my comprehensive exam reading, away from my grant proposals, and I have to think of those as separate projects. So how is it that you can manage all of your projects and think about breaking them down into the smaller tasks and then manage it within your time blocks? I know this may sound complicated. It's a lot more complicated when you have a PhD and multiple businesses, but ultimately you want to establish what it is that are your major projects. So for me, I have my academic life, which is my PhD, my professional life, which is my businesses, my YouTube channel, etc. And the third thing is my personal life. And within those 3 categories, I break it up depending on the various tasks, in the same way that a business would break down a project. So set up a visual map of the different tasks that you have based on those categories. Within my PhD, I would say I have 4 primary tasks. That is my dissertation, comprehensive exam prep, applying for grants with writing proposals, and my research position. So within that, then you break it up again and you think of the various tasks that go within that, and then you break it up into your calendar. This will allow you to set up long-term and short-term goals, as well as to establish which routine works depending on the demands of those tasks and how often they arise. Now on to number 7, which is long and short-term expectations. So one thing that you want to ask yourself on a day-to-day basis is what actually needs to be done today. Look at your to-do list, look at that calendar and your schedule, and figure out what it is you truly need to get done today and what goes on the long-term to-do list. So essentially establish 2 to-do lists. You have your priorities list. So for example, on a given day, I know that I need to submit something that is due. I have a larger project that I'm working on that I know I need to be making progress on every day. So I know I need to commit an hour or 2 to that. I also know that I need to go get groceries. So those are my 3 primary tasks for the day. And then I have my longer to-do list, which is responding to so-and-so's email. It may be pressing, but it can also perhaps be done tomorrow. Ultimately, with time management and with your short and long-term expectations, you want to be realistic about what it is that you can get done on a single day and what may be something that you should focus on in the long term. For example, responding to emails. Another thing that you can say is, for example, laundry, or things that perhaps can be taken care of tomorrow or the next day. Put it into your calendar because, like I stated before, you want to use your calendar as a way to feasibly get through your to-do list, and making time each day to get through those tasks is important in order to make sure that you are being efficient with your time and that you are able to move on to your next tasks the following day. Now on to number 7, which is all about communication. In my perfect week, I have social time on Friday evening and Saturday morning. I say this to every single one of my friends that I might want to spend time with, that my time is available Friday evenings and Saturday morning, and no other time during the week, because my schedule has to be just so in order for me to get everything done on time. When you're setting up those clear expectations and communicating with your family, with your friends, with your colleagues, that you have specific blocks for specific tasks, it allows people to also know when it is that they are meant to contact you. For example, my assistant typically will not contact me on Monday afternoon because she knows that I typically have a meeting. It also allows you to communicate and delegate your time in the future because, for example, like we talked about earlier in the video, when you have that set schedule, you're able to communicate that with others. I know, for example, that I just don't do anything but schoolwork on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And so if somebody's asking me to jump on a client call, or if they're asking for another meeting, the answer is immediately no, but I know that I also have some time on Tuesday morning and I have some time on Thursday afternoon when I can meet with people, for example, a podcast interview, or if I need to interview a potential hire. This has allowed me to set boundaries, and it's been really important for my general productivity. And it's something that I highly recommend that you consider, is being able to communicate what it is that your schedule is with the people in your life. So that way you can set up expectations about when it is that you're available, as well as when you are unavailable. This will also hopefully help limit distractions because people will not be trying to get a hold of you during the times when you're meant to be working. Number 9 is the flow state. We talk about this a lot in terms of focus and being able to zero in on your work. But one thing that I urge you to consider is trying to figure out when you can hit that flow state, or pushing yourself to hit that flow state. It takes between 15 and 20 minutes in order to hit your flow state, and that requires 15 to 20 minutes of pure focus. As we talked about earlier in the video, this includes things like the environment and limiting distractions, but it's also about having the discipline to get into that flow state. Oftentimes I'll work on a task for 5-10 minutes and then I'll grab my phone and I've immediately disrupted the cycle. However, if you can set a timer, for example, a Pomodoro timer for 25 or 50 minutes, and really get yourself to focus in on one particular task within that time, then you are able to hit your flow state. This is something that I focused on in particular for the year 2022, because I noticed, especially last year, that in order to get into the flow state, I needed to be in a high stress situation. But now I'm trying to train myself, my brain, and just my general habits to get into that flow state when it is that I'm working, because I try to make sure that when I'm blocking out my day, every task has at least 30 minutes or 60 minutes. So that way I have a set amount of time where I do have enough space to get into the flow state, rather than trying to do 15-minute blocks here and there where it's really difficult to jump between and it's a lot easier to get distracted. So another piece to time blocking is establishing those 30-minute to 60-minute windows, so that way you do have time to get into that flow state. My last and final tip is to leave room for imperfection. I am saying this tip out loud for you as much as I am saying it for me, because ultimately one of the most difficult things about having a busy schedule and managing your time is also leaving room for the possibility for things to go wrong. There are going to be things that arise, for example, a disruptive phone call, or your assignment doesn't quite go right, or you're having a really bad day. You can account for these things. Leave some wiggle room in your schedule for things to go wrong. I have had a particularly difficult time taking this tip to heart as someone who wants to maintain my perfect back-to-back schedule where I can jump from task to task. Things don't always go to plan. If I've learned anything in the last 2 years of this PhD and having my businesses, is that things will go wrong, and they will go wrong quite often, in which case you just have to account for it, and you have to leave room for you to rest, for you to recover, for you to be upset, for you to need to take a break. And so make sure that you're scheduling your rest. Make sure that you have time within your schedule that is flexible. For example, if you know a task is only going to take 30 minutes, perhaps give yourself that hour-long block, because you can get that task done and then have a little bit more leeway for a break rather than having these 30-minute blocks back to back to back. Give yourself a little bit of wiggle room. I used to do client calls back to back, and one thing that I found was that I would get really fatigued really quickly. But if I gave myself 20 minutes in between each call, that would give me enough time to lay down on the couch for a minute or to just disassociate on my phone. And that really helped me in order to feel like I could get through my calls and get through the day. So however that looks for you, make sure that you leave room for imperfection in your schedule, because things don't always go to plan. However, you can plan for things not to go to plan, and you can leave some flexibility in your schedule. All right, everyone, that is it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much again to Babbel, the sponsor of today's video, for working with me. Time management is very personal, and you can take or leave whatever of these tips work for you. I hope that it was helpful. Thank you all so much for watching. Give this video a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you all in the next one. Thanks, everyone.